With the first pick in the NFL draft, the Houston Texans select
Kevon Thibodeaux, the pass rusher extraordinaire for this Ducks defense.
Number 97, Aiden Hutchinson.
Derek Stingley made the pick.
Ball is intercepted. That is the All-American Kyle Hamilton.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. And it's the bye week this week, so there wasn't a game to lament this week. And we've obviously got Tennessee coming up, but I can tell you what's going to happen already for that. So I don't think we'll spend much time talking about that either. But we thought we'd spend this week trying to look ahead. It's that time already of the year. Going to talk some draft this week, so I couldn't think of anybody better to join me this week. In probably describe me as world famous now, Jordan, I think, but certainly the best guy we could have got to come and do this today, Jordan Punt, Texans thoughts, coming to talk some draft picks. How you doing, Jordan? All right?
I'm doing great. Well, I guess great isn't the word with how the Texans have been doing, but other than that, I've been doing pretty good. Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure, and I'm excited to talk ball with you, man. How have you been doing?
Yeah, good. Well, you're getting there this season. I think it's tough, isn't it? Yeah. Because you've got, you've got very few sort of lights at the end of the tunnel. And I suppose the draft is that for it, and that's, I suppose, the equaliser and the parity of the salary cap and the draft is one thing that makes this league cyclical. So I'm holding on to that thought. What about you?
Yeah, I'm holding on to that, and especially knowing how many picks that we could potentially have, and high quality picks if this Deshaun Watson trade eventually gets done. I know trade deadline's passed, but at the end of the season, leading up to the draft, if that trade gets done, I mean, we could be looking at like 6-7 top 100 picks. And so knowing how important that can be for a rebuild, I mean, that's definitely, like you said, the light at the end of the tunnel for this unfortunate Texans season. Yeah,
and if you had to make a bet right now, what team do you think will pull the trigger with eventually? Should it come to that? Hopefully,
it's gonna be Miami. I think it has to be. I mean, that's the only team we've seen so far that Watson is willing to waive that no trade clause for. So Panthers made some noise. Eagles have made some noise. I think some people bring up the Giants as potentially having the capital to trade for him. But at the end of the day, Deshaun does have that one part of the say in this, what team he plays for. And so it's probably going to be Miami. I would assume that they kind of have some sort of framework in place. I know that's what John McClain had reported, and I think Pat Storm said that as well, which makes sense because we've had so many months to talk about this and so many months to talk about all these possible scenarios. So it only makes sense to me that they have some sort of deal in place, but we just got to figure out what goes on with the allegation. So I think it'll be Miami. Is that your thought as well?
Well, it always seemed like that, but then I think if you think your biggest complaint with this organisation is it's not putting you in a position to win, after watching that game a couple of weeks ago, I don't think necessarily they'll put him in a better chance to win. And if it's if it is lifestyle aspirations and glamour and the money's kind of changed them, as some people have alluded to, then I mean, fair enough. I don't think they've got the best deal to offer. I think you could end up with 3 picks in the 20s quite easily. Maybe not this year with the way the 49ers are going right enough. They seem to just be in injury hell, and but you never know. Trey Lance might come and turn that thing around down the stretch. So there's a lot to be decided. But it seems strange in a way that would be the only pick. You've got to hope time just lets it marinate a little, and he'll be open in that camp, and all this stuff will be over. But they'll be open to a wider array of possibilities and locations for him to go to, because if they wait, hopefully that might change their tune a bit, because you never know where Miami might be at the end of the year. But you saw their stands are empty, our stadium's empty, so both teams need a change. Whether it'll come working together or not, I don't know. From what you've seen this season, needs of which there are many, but what would you say is kind of top 2 or 3 that you think, pertaining to the quality and the depth in this class by position, but what would you think our top couple of needs are? Try and shore up come draft time in Vegas.
Yeah, so I think definitely number 1 is offensive line. I mean, that is the worst position group across the entire Texans team. And we've seen it this year. It's been a complete detriment to the offense. Run game can't do anything. Pass protection can't hold up. And so That's where I would start for sure, because this year we'll hear it a lot that it's not that strong of a quarterback class. And so instead of going and reaching for, Matt Corral, Malik Willis, we'll talk about those guys later, I'm sure. But instead of reaching for that quarterback, go get your offensive line, go build it, go get it right. Because, and I think you tweeted about this too, is that looking at this line, there's not many people that you actually want to bring back whatsoever. I mean, you've got Tunsil, who some people say you could trade him. I don't think they actually will. You got Titus, who he needs to go out to right tackle to actually play well because he's not a guard. After that, I don't want anyone. Nobody. Not Heck, not Cannon, not Sharping, not McCray. Britt can come back maybe, but even the guy they started yesterday, I thought he played at the same level as Britt.
Yeah.
The rookie.
And he's first ever start in the league, so
a 7th round pick.
Yeah. Well, that's I think it just shows you that there wasn't because there was a guy that does kind of film review tweeted back at me asking how I thought he did. Jimmy Morrissey, and I said, well, yeah, apart from a couple of mistakes, I don't think he was a net negative. So, yeah, I think that just shows you the bar at so many positions is set in so incredibly low that it's going to take a lot to not improve the team. But I mean, and I'm interested to see this year, Jordan, how Caserio approaches the draft, because last year he effectively shunned it in many ways, which I don't know if he would regret. Now, particularly all these kind of veterans he's gone after. How do you think he'll approach it? Because for me, if you do get multiple picks, I think you've got to trade back at least one of them to try and pick up some extra. Because the infamous draft that Chris Ballard, this only draft that Chris Ballard gets lauded for, he picked up so much value at the top of that second round. In the end of the first, top of the seconds, where you can really kind of pick up value and get guys that just drop just by positional value, by sometimes knocks that come on people's character or health concerns or whatever. So how would you approach it? Or if you were Caserio, how would you be hoping he would approach this?
That's a tough question, because I feel like my approach will always be just take the best player available. And so kind of going into, a draft, it changes so much depending on who's there at the board. Like, it's so unpredictable is my point here. And so it's hard to go into it with like a set strategy in terms of like trading down, trading up. It was interesting last year that in his first draft class, he was very willing to trade up. And you could argue that the two trades he made to trade up for Nico Collins and to trade up for eventually Garrett Wallow, he kind of paid a hefty price to make those trades. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of continues that pattern in this next class, and he won't care as much about making that pricey trade, because now look at him, he's accumulating all the 6th round draft picks in the entire NFL. He's got 3 this year, got 3 the next, and so he has that capital now to move up and go select the guys that he can really trust. So that's kind of what I would expect him to do based off of the evidence that we have from last season. But in my opinion, what I would do, like you said, if I was Nick Caserio, I'm not a big fan of trading up. I think if you don't like a guy where you're picking, and there's not like a guy who's the best player available that you're happy with and he can fit your team and all that, then trade down, like you said, go accumulate that capital. Especially in this draft class, top of the 2nd round, that's where you're going to find your steals. That's where there's a lot of value. I think there's a good amount of like first round, like graded talent this year. And so because of that, they're going to fall early 30s to the 40s. That's going to be your money range this year for sure. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I think last year as well, I don't think he had enough players on his board when he was picking it. It seemed like that anyway, by the time they got to the end. And obviously your last pick of the draft was Lopez, and he's probably outsnapped his slate quite considerably. So you never know. It's just I think that's the probably when they've kind of frittered away some picks at times. It'd be interesting to see if they do go for volume more this year than last, because it was obviously the smallest draft class in history, the smallest undrafted free agent class in history as well. So you've got to hope that there's an element of being selective for the quality at the spot you're picking at, or going up to find a guy if you've got them overrated versus where they're falling to. But yeah, I wonder if Caserio will treat this differently. I don't know, but you said he set a pattern, so perhaps he'll follow that. But certainly, and I got the New England thing, but they've always kind of traded back and picked up, and taken more shots, more darts at the board sort of thing. And it is, and it's so tough. And I think doing this, kind of looking through these guys this week, I think I really found that I got a new appreciation for sort of trying to calibrate guys. You've not always got like much all-22 view. You've not always got, you know, the inside. I do like watching the interviews because I think you get a feel for a guy, because then you can kind of understand quite quickly, you know, what they're about and what's the kind of, you know, is there necessarily like, you know, a character should they, and you can't always tell from an interview, but I think you can always kind of get a bit of a feel for it. And then as well, I know obviously there's the underwear Olympics that kind of sway a lot, and I probably understand why. You know, that gives you just that extra data point on raw athleticism, what you need as a baseline in the league. So like it's definitely you know, you can see how it's an all year round process, because there was so many rabbit holes, so many other guys' names I wrote down that I want to go and look into later and stuff. So the list is endless, but ultimately roughly most teams will have 20-25 picks, first round grades roughly on any given year, and then roughly about 150, 170 players that they've got draftable grades upon, and the rest are all kind of undrafted priority free agents, all that kind of stuff. So that being said, Jordan, certainly the consensus at this point, before all that over-analysis and paralysis by analysis kicks in at the end of the season, as a whole industry. But Kevon Thibodeaux, out of Oregon, defensive end, 3-year starter now. Is he your sort of undoubted number one player in this draft?
Yeah, he was going into this season, and I think even despite the injury that he's had, he still remains that top player, because he's shown he can be the, you know, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, who was it last year, Chase Young, like that type of alpha pass rusher who, you know, you can depend on him to bring you double-digit sack seasons. He's going to draw attention from offenses and make, you know, your opposite edge rusher's job easier. And so I think he's the top guy this year, especially with no quarterback really elevating themselves. The ability to get a type of guy like Kevon Thibodeaux that you can build a defense around is amazing, because it's not even just like he's an elite pass rusher and all he's going to do is get you sacks. Like, he defends the run really well. They drop him in coverage. He can play from different stances. So positionally, you're all good there. If you want to run a 3-4, 4-3, he's a super smart guy off the field. He wants to get into so many different business opportunities after football. So you can tell, like, he's great on the field, great off the field. He's got a good head on his shoulders. There's really not many question marks about Kevon Thibodeaux whatsoever. And so, yes, he is my number one guy. Is he yours as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm early stages at this year, but I think just with having a pick is the novelty, isn't it? Right, so you get to talk about these guys with a semblance of a chance that they might be on your team the following year. Mm-hmm. I think he is. There's something that I can't quite put my finger on though. When I watch his tape, and look, I know like evaluating pass rush is really difficult without the all-22, because, and same with offensive linemen getting into the nitty-gritty of it, because if you've got like a 20% win rate at the point of attack in the trenches, that's all pro level stuff. So it's like you've got it, so you can only take 20% of snaps of success. So that's difficult to try and evaluate, I think, and then to try and then calibrate that across other guys who are winning up in the trenches. So that there's definitely a lot to like about his game. I wrote down, I thought he's a ball of clay. I think if you get him in the right coach and the right system, and maybe where he's not having everything on his shoulders from day one, he could take time to develop and be, an all-pro type player. There's definitely something about him, just maybe at the line of scrimmage, just at the point of attack, where it just needs a bit of work, I think, and his hand placement, his hand fighting, and look, all rookies do, so it's not unique to him at all. Yeah. But you can just see the raw athleticism there, the way he bursts through the line of scrimmage. It's exciting to watch, and he's a high motor guy. He reminds me of Jadeveon though so much, I think, in some ways, because he is an elite run defender, which is quite rare, because I think when we talk about the other prospects, I think that's always the big knock, that a lot of people can rush in their own way, and there's so many ways to do that, but run defending, it's the nitty gritty, it's the hard stuff, it's the unglamorous stuff that doesn't get you sacked. So people, TFL's same effect on the game, but people don't like it so as much, it's not as glitzy. But I think there's a lot there to like with Thibodeaux. But there is some rough edges, but I think it's tough to see as a guy up front, not too many knocks on him, really. Yeah,
I think what really interests me about Kevon Thibodeaux is that, like you said, like, he's definitely an elite athlete. And I think last year in 2020 and even 2019, when he was a freshman, you saw he relied pretty much purely on his athleticism. Like you said, he could improve his hands for sure. And that's why I kind of compare him a little bit to Chase Young, just because out of college, like he was basically just a speed rusher and that was it. But that part of your game, like improving your hands, like you can always improve that. Now, not everyone does, obviously, but you can improve that. And I think in 2021, he's shown that just a little bit. He's taken a little bit of a step in that regard. And so far, he is first among edge rushers in terms of pressure percentage. So he's getting a pressure on 21% of his snaps. He already has 4 sacks in just 6 games. He had 3 last year in 7 games. So he's already eclipsed his total from the year before. And so, yeah, I just think in terms of these, these young collegiate prospects, we're always thinking about, what are they now, but then also what can they become in the future? And so to get to that future projection, we want to see them taking those steps every year. And I think Kevon has done that so far. So like you said, I mean, there's not many question marks about him. So yeah, he's my number one guy. And I think one last thing I want to end on is in terms of like ceiling and what he can become. I think he can become a guy like Shaq Barrett. That's where I kind of see his eventual projection being like, because he's an elite athlete, but also Barrett has that elite technique. And so if Kevon can put that together, he can be an alpha pass rusher on a Super Bowl winning type of defense. So that's a great type of pick to make number 1 overall.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously Shaq Barrett was a bit of a late bloomer, just didn't get the snaps at Denver and then flourished in Tampa. And he's one of the the great examples of you can always find money in pass rushers. And when it comes down to positional value, Jordan, would you always go edge number 1 over anything apart from quarterback?
Yeah, that's tough. It's really tough. I think definitely your big 3 is your quarterback, your offensive tackle, and your edge. And so I think even nowadays, I think edge is becoming more important than an offensive tackle because offenses are getting so good at kind of protecting those tackles. Like you can chip for them, you can run screens more, you can run more quick game stuff, use play action. And so the way that offensive concepts and schemes are evolving, you don't need elite tackles as much as you do before if you have the right scheme. Now, not every team always does and can protect those tackles, but so because of that, I think it's easier to help out a tackle than it is to help out a defensive end. So yeah, defensive end would be my number 1 after quarterback. Yeah,
and I think on your defense, perhaps the second most valuable and the hardest position to find in general is corner. And I think Derek Stingley, albeit he's injured, so it's going to roll some flags. I think it's a funny year because you're coming off a COVID year, which is not a great baseline. You've got guys who there's tens and tens of guys that are jumping up boards that weren't there at the start of the year because last year was just a kind of odd year in the wilderness for a lot of guys. But Derek Stingley, very much mooted as just as good, if not, as was Jalen Ramsey coming out of Florida State. He's mirror match capability coming off the line. He can go up and press. He can go up and win the ball. I think he kind of does everything really well. He's one of these prospects that's kind of hard to pinpoint much of a flaw in his game at the stage of his career because he's so polished and kind of pro ready, if you like, for a term. Now he's not there right now, but he's not played a lot of games. I think he had 7 or 8 interceptions in his first year at LSU, and he's kind of sort of last year, funny year for everyone, and now he's injured. So a guy like that, undoubted talent. But there's always that adage of hurt guys stay hurt. What do you think of him firstly, and then secondly, does the injury concern you?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to bunch those things together because the injury and last year it warps kind of my thoughts on him, and it's kind of changed for sure. I mean, there's probably not an elite prospect who has lost more stock than Stingley has in these past 2 years, and it sucks to see because, like you said, like as a true freshman, LSU SEC conference, like this guy was the best defender in the nation. It's him and Thibodeaux right there. 15 PBUs, 6 interceptions. Like he was doing it all for LSU. And like you said, that playmaker ability, it's really, really hard to find. So I think that's like the main thing that you still want to like, the main reason why you'd still draft Stingley. It's that playmaking ability. Like not every cornerback can get those interceptions. Sometimes they're just like, they're so good in coverage that they're not even thrown their way. Right. And so they won't see, those big interception numbers, but Stingley does it all. And he kind of reminds me a bit of JC Jackson, who's a guy who's leading the NFL in interceptions over the past few years. So that would be kind of my comp for him. So I see, the really big positives with Stingley, and I would understand still taking him in the top 10, but I don't think I would take him top 3. I would even question taking him top 5 just because of the past 2 years. Like you said, it started up here and it's really been on a decline. And 2020 COVID year for sure. That gives him a bit of an excuse. LSU lost so much talent. That gives him a bit of an excuse as well. But at the end of the day, he didn't play well. And he had 0 interceptions, just 5 PBUs in his 7 games. It showed a lot more issues on tape, in my opinion, and even some tackling issues.
Yeah,
and that showed up against in 2021. He had some really, really bad moments of tackling. And of course, for a cornerback, that's kind of the nitpicky thing. But when we're talking about these cornerbacks that you're going to take potentially top 3, top 5, you're talking about the Jalen Ramsey types. What really separates Ramsey apart from the playmaking is the tackling. Like, he tackles like a linebacker. And so if Stingley doesn't add that to his resume and it's actually a liability, then I mean, I have to dock them some points for that. And so I recognize all the great things you talk about Stingley, his playmaking ability, all that stuff, and his potential still being really high. And so I'd still take him top 10, but he has lost some stock for me. And I think he might not even be cornerback 1 for me this year.
Yeah, I think so. Of any position, I think corner is a year position because you have to be at the top of your game athletically. Yeah, you've got to have no injuries. You've got to have fluid hips. You've got to be able to read and react. You've got to be able to keep an eye for the ball. You've got to communicate with your teammates around you. Like, it's one of the hardest positions to play. It's one of the hardest positions to transition from college, just because the passing game is so different because it's not spread out as much. And I think I do see a lot of guys. Still sort of anointing Stingley as the number 1 guy. I know you've obviously got Andrew Booth and Clemson. I watched a bit of the Washington tape just with some of the other games we were watching for this. Trent McDuffie's he's got attitude. I think anyone no more attitude than somebody. Cincinnati got Sauce Gardner, so that's, I think, all good players, but some flaws as well. They're not the kind of elite prospects that you've seen. So Stingley was meant to be that, and I think there's a kind of, some people have got Booth and then some people have got McDuffie, and I've seen even Khalil Alim out of Florida as well. I've seen him kind of up there, but it's a mixed bag across the board. So I think it's more about pick your style rather than having an obvious one, because I think that's from a Houston point of view, we've never had a shutdown number 1 corner who's one of your top 3 or 4 best guys in your team. Maybe arguably a couple of first years of Jonathan Joseph, he was the highest paid player at one point on the defense, but it would be nice to add, but it feels like it may not be the year for that. Yeah,
especially at our pick right now, which we're picking at 2. I don't think we'll pick any lower than 3 on the year.
Definitely not.
But so I don't think I would take Stingley at 2 or 3. I wouldn't take any of the other corners at 2 or 3. But if, like we said at the beginning of this, that Deshaun Watson trade, if we get the 49ers pick, maybe that ends up in the teens, somewhere like that in the early 20s. Then yeah, definitely all those guys you named. The one I'll bring up that you didn't mention is Ahmad Gardner. They call him Sauce Gardner. Cornerback at Cincinnati. He's got the height. He's got long arms. People compare him to Trevon Diggs because he gets a lot of interceptions. So I think he's a guy definitely to look out for as well. There's a lot of good cornerbacks in this class, man.
Yeah, I think it's kind of picking what you write for your scheme, and I think that's the. That's I talked about this last week as well, that I think that this is the trouble now, that you've got this kind of coaching staff who shouldn't really be here, a lot of them. And do you pick players that don't necessarily suit the next scheme? And I think that's the worry, because, like particularly corner of any position, it has to be scheme specific. And we've seen the last 2 years, a year and a half up to this point, halfway through this year, of guys being asked to do stuff they weren't good at, not being put in a position to succeed. And moving on, and you saw that with C.J. Henderson and in Jacksonville. It goes 9th overall, and then they're shipping him out because the next coaching staff comes in. So you can have like a real if somebody offered you 3 top 10 picks for Watson, you'd probably take top 3 picks over mid-teens 20s, because they're just worth so much more because you get that pick of the bunch. But it's a tough one, corner. But yeah, I think if you had it and it all fell to you nicely, if you could pick up a pass rusher and a corner to give you 2 cornerstones of this defense, it would be the perfect opening round to the draft, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, speaking to your point about being like scheme specific, like Stingley can do it all. I think Kyrie Elam and Gardner are more like press man types of guys. And then Booth and McDuffie are more of your off coverage, your zone guys. So I think those two would be the ones that would fit the Texans the best. And then to your point, it's a tough discussion, man. Do you draft for scheme? Do you draft just talent? I think you got to just draft for talent, and you got to force Lovie Smith to say, hey, Lovie, if you do not switch up your scheme, like, hey, we gave you this first year. We tried it your way. We played Tampa 2. We didn't disguise anything. It didn't work. All right. Next year, if you're not going to adjust your scheme to these players that we brought in, you're done. So I think we just got to go talent, and then hope Lovie can make some adjustments. And if he can't, he's out of here. Bring in the next DC.
Yeah, no, definitely. So looking at edge rusher, because this is a position the team haven't invested in. It goes right back to when they let Jadeveon Clowney go. There was no replacement really. Jonathan Greenard's been a nice addition to this team this year, but he's going to be a number 2 and a number 3 on a good team, or a relief guy, or a positional or a situational rusher. But he is your perfect sort of complement to a dominant rusher, I think, and he'll if you get somebody in the middle that can give you some pressure up the gut, he's a guy that will clean up and make sides, because he's a smart footballer, and you've seen that this year. I think his numbers have probably maybe been a little bit inflated versus his actual raw tape, but it was stuff. But the guy you brought up, so this week myself and Jordan have got 5 prospects each, kind of. I've probably gone a little bit out of the line just with my various ones I've picked up, but your first guy, Jordan, was Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. Do you want to run through him?
Yeah, so Aiden Hutchinson, he's a senior edge prospect. He's 6'6", 265. For me, he's the second best edge behind Kevon Thibodeaux, and in most years he could be the best edge defender, but Kevon is just a freak. He's a top 3 overall player for me as well. I think I go Kevon, and then you can put it Aiden Hutchinson, or you can put it Kyle Hamilton, however you want to put it. Those are my top 3 this year. I think he can be that alpha pass rusher. We just talked about John Grenard being, maybe more of the Robin to your Batman, and Aiden Hutchinson, he can be your Batman. He can be your alpha guy. He's done that for Michigan this year. He has 6 sacks, 7.5 tackle for losses in 9 games. He's 3rd in the nation in pressure percentage. So I talked about how Thibodeaux was 1st. Hutchinson's 3rd at 18.3% pressure percentage. In terms of things like traits on the field that I love about him and why I think he's going to translate, he's just such a feisty guy in the trenches, nonstop motor, super physical. He just looks like he hates being blocked. And so he's constantly using his hands to get off you. He's got good speed, he's got good power, and he's got good technique. That's the crazy thing about Hutchinson, is he is a freak athlete, but he also has really, really good technique. I think he's got better technique than Kevon Thibodeaux. Really good rush plan, really good counter moves, a wide variety of pass rush moves. Like, he really does it all. There's not many holes in Hutchinson's game. Just to play devil's advocate and throw out one of the things that you'll hear they'll knock down his stock is that he reportedly has short arms, but that's literally it. Other than that, like, he is as clean of an edge prospect as you could imagine. So I'm very high on Aiden Hutchinson. Yeah,
and he's got a bit of a go-to with the swim move as well. Saw that a couple of times flash on tape. Kind of dips and rips a bit. He's got quite a good sort of kind of push-pull action as well. He doesn't really bend the edge as much as I thought he might do. And he's obviously, but there's 2 things that made me think about him. See what you think, Jordan. He's got David Ojabo on the other side of him, who's come out as a guy I've been aware of, because he's actually originally from Scotland.
Yes.
So being aware of a couple of guys that kind of kept in touch with him, that I know that they've been hot on him for a long time now. So he's a guy that's obviously other players open up opportunities for him. So he's got somebody across from him that's helping him as well. And I think probably about a year ago, I don't think he would have been in this discussion. I know he's jumped up his playing strength. You can see that if you watch even the 2019 stuff, and I think his playing strength jumped right up, and he looks a different player in that sense. So without that ability to bend the edge, I wonder, not doing it in the previous years to the level he's doing it, is there a bit of a risk there, considering he's helped with that, and he's kind of not one year wonder production wise, but it's certainly been a big jump from last year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair criticism. I mean, 6 sacks this year, but last year it was 0. Now it was mainly because of the injury. He only played 2 games, so that's a big reason why. But then in 2019, sophomore year, 3.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and that was in a full season. So, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. You look at a guy, he puts up 3.5 sacks. You're not thinking he's going to be a first round pick, let alone the hype he's getting, top 5, top 10. But I think this year, I think it's the steps that he's taken in, like you said, the strength and also the technique. When you're not that guy who's going to bend the edge every time, like a Kevon Thibodeaux, like you just beat him off the snap and you can bend really easily, you have to supplement in an area. And he supplements with his technique. Like you said, so many different moves. He's got the swim, got the push pull, he's got the side scissors, he's got a good rip. Like he really does it all. And so he kind of reminds me a lot of the Bosa brothers. Those guys, very good athletes, maybe not elite in terms of the bend. I know they both had bad like 3-cone drills, so that kind of talks about your agility. And I'll kind of expect Hutchinson to be similar in that sense. But they still get the job done because they're such good technicians. So those are the guys I kind of compare him to, them and Max Crosby, the guy for the Raiders who's been really breaking out. I just compare those two because Crosby and Hutchinson both have really elite motors and they just like hate to be blocked. And so they're just constantly fighting. And I think that's an element of the trenches that you definitely need. Just that nonstop like grit and toughness. And so I would really like him to be drafted to the Texans. I think he'd be paired really well with Grenard.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely, I mean, if Thibodeaux goes, I think the next team on the board, there is a good chance he will take that. And I was looking at edge rushers after you sent me your list first, and I thought, well, I tried to find a couple. I was looking through the guys. He got like Drake Jackson, USC, really big, fluid athlete for his size. Looks like he could be a good rusher. Kind of questionable technique, but he's up there as a sort of second, sort of late first kind of prospect. Adam Anderson's another one. Majay Sanders at Cincinnati as well. When I was watching a bit of the Gardner tape, I think he definitely flashed at times, but he looks a little bit undersized. So there's a lot of guys that are kind of hovering around there now. There's Kingsley Engadabari, I think I'm saying that right, from South Carolina. He looks like a real prospect, but he's one guy. So I sort of nailed it down to him, and then the guy I actually picked to look into. I really enjoyed his tape, and there's some people that've got him in top 3 in the draft, and there's some people that have got him, late second round. Is George Kolaftus or Karlaftis. He's actually a Greek national, didn't move to the US until like his teenage years. He was a shot put player, just an athlete. And I think when you watch his game, it's not developed. So if you go Thibodeaux, Hutchinson, far better run defenders. He gets caught inside his eyes. There's a couple of plays. I watched the tape against Iowa and Notre Dame because I thought quality pedigree lineman, get a good feel for it. And I really liked his tape. Now, this was one thing you learn about kind of when you're doing a bit of scouting is actually when you watch the Michigan State Spartans game at the weekend for Purdue. So, didn't do much, didn't contribute a whole amount. So that game was not his best tape. So you've got to take a sample size, you've got to take it on account. So some of the games he was disruptive, getting the backfield. He's got a great bend on the edge. Which probably got that edge over Aiden Hutchinson in that sense. But he's 6'4", 275. Pedigree 3-4 outside, 3-4 defensive end, 4-3 DN. But I think he's definitely got a lot of ceiling in there. He just kind of dominant bend on the edge, and I think there's a guy there that's really unrefined at this stage. His floor is probably a little bit lower than some of the guys we just mentioned there, but I think the guy's ceiling could potentially be really high. He's got a strong bull rush. He's got a great snatch, kind of pull move. He long arms guys, and as well as bend around the edge, so he can kind of attack you different ways. I think as well. Weaknesses, he does give up his chest a lot. Kind of gets caught locked to, and that's what came up on the tape on the weekend there against the Spartans. That he just kind of gets locked up and kind of gets out of games. Eyes get a little bit lazy at times and loses track of the flow of the run. So yeah, I think he's a guy that I think could have a huge ceiling. But he's one of these guys. It's kind of got that Amoki Okoye vibes. I think there's potentially something there that you could just it's a ball of clay, but just less refined and less seasoned as a football player, I think.
For sure. Yeah, I think boomer bust kind of comes to my mind when I think about him. Like you said, he's raw. And I think it was interesting, like what you said about depending on what game you watch of him, basically, like you could have a very different opinion on him unless you watch every single game of the season that's really available. So like, I watched two mainly. I watched Iowa and then I watched versus Oregon State. Iowa game, this guy looked better than Kevon Thibodeaux. He was unblockable versus Iowa. Absolutely insane. And he was really, really good with his hands in that game. Showed off multiple moves, like you said, just different ways to win. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got to rethink this. I might actually have to rank him over Hutchinson. But then I watched the Oregon State game and he disappeared for most of it. And you're not seeing his name getting into the backfield very often. And so, like you said, that consistency is definitely a big thing. But he has the athletic traits that if you got good coaches that you can trust, and if you believe in his work ethic, those types of intangibles, then yeah, he can hit that ceiling. I think he can probably be a guy who he'll have a few double-digit sack seasons, but it'll probably average around like 7 to 9 in that sense, just because he has to take such big jumps in the technique department really to become that alpha guy. So I don't know. I like Kolaftus for sure. I think he's probably top 10 talents. I think he's going to be edge number 3 for me, which is very, very good in this class still. But yeah, comparing him to guys like Hutchinson, comparing him to guys like Thibodeaux, I just wish he was more consistent for sure. And it all comes down to the technique. So that's coachable, like I said before. So yeah, I'm a Kolaftus fan.
Yeah, and staying on the defensive side of the ball, we've got a number of these to try and rattle through. But there was this guy made a number of plays where you just sit and go, whoa, wait a minute. And you have to watch it a couple of times to understand just exactly what he's done. And Kyle Hamilton, I heard his coach, Brian Kelly, calls him the eraser. And he does that. And I just wrote down range, ball skills, awareness. And he can do so many things. They line him in the slot. He goes up against tight ends. He goes up against wide receivers. He can go and jam guys at the line of scrimmage. His read and react ability was I've not seen a player like that for a long time. And I suppose there was a 4th and 1 against Purdue when I was watching the Kolaftus tape that he just knifes into the backfield in the 4th and 1. Just awareness, gets downhill, makes a play. And he comes out in the zone against he blitz off the line of scrimmage. He gets a lucky interception in that Purdue game, but if you watch him against Bama in 2020, going up against the cast of wide receivers, Mac Jones slinging it, and he makes some mistakes in that game, and he makes a mistake against Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago as well. He just kind of gets caught underneath the ball. So the only question is, I've not seen him is in coverage. You know, if people were to go at him down after down after down, because in college people avoid him. You know how good his coverage ability would be if he's getting tested. And I think that's probably where he needs to work on his game. But at 6'4", 220, he's a lean 220. The guy is huge, and I've not seen many players like that, Jordan. And I think when I watched his tape, I thought this guy could impact your defense on every single play. And I don't know if you can necessarily always say that about edge rush. We're talking about 20% of the time is top end success, whereas this guy can be involved 30-40% of the play. But normally people won't draft a safety this high, and I thought he's a really interesting case of could you take this guy. And the more I watched him, I was struck. Apart from that touchdown against Cincinnati, I was struggling to find reasons why you wouldn't want to take him if he's there sitting at 2 or 3. Yeah,
definitely. I agree with you. Normal conventional thinking, like you're not taking a safety at 2, at 3, because even if you think about it, even if Kyle Hamilton ends up being the best safety in the NFL, like who's the best safety in the NFL right now? And how really important is he into that team's success? Like maybe it's Derwin James, Minkah Fitzpatrick, someone like that. But there's always paired with someone else, always paired with like, you know, a better player, like a TJ Watt or Joey Bosa. You know what I mean? So I totally understand that part of the argument that a lot of people are going to bring up. But like you said, it's so hard not to love this guy. And it's not that he's just a safety. Right. So it's like you're drafting a safety, a nickel corner, a linebacker, all in one in the top 3. And so when you put it like that, you talk about his versatility. then it makes a lot more sense to take him as high as he's being mocked. And he's good at all those positions. He can play either safety position, free. He can play strong. He's got the range for free. He's got the physicality and tackling for strong. I believe he's played nickel corner the most out of all of his snaps this year for Notre Dame. And so he's kind of been that star defender where it's like a hybrid between the nickel and the linebacker. So you really need that star defender to be able to tackle in the run game. And that's a position that in Lovie Smith's Tampa 2, it's so pivotal, so pivotal, because the reason why that it works, the Tampa 2 works, is because you can play with those two safeties deep, which obviously takes one safety out of the box. But if you have that star defender, he kind of acts as your other box defender to still defend the run while having those two safeties deep to be versus the pass. So seeing that and Kyle Hamilton execute that part of Notre Dame's defense so well, you can see how it can translate to the Texans. You can really see how he can play multiple positions for the Texans defense and still have a great impact. My comp for him is definitely, I think it's Derwin James. I think that was the first name I mentioned because he does it all, just like Derwin. He's built like a linebacker. He can blitz, he can cover, he can defend the run. Like you said, makes an impact on every single play, basically all three downs, all phases of the game. So I'm a big Kyle Hamilton fan as well, man. It's going to be hard to pass him up. My only gripe about him is that I'm not sure Lovie would have a good enough plan to use him right. We're seeing like he has struggled to put a lot of our defenders into the right position. Like he's making Desmond King play outside cornerback. Justin Reed's playing strong safety instead of free safety because Lonnie Johnson is playing free safety. And so when you have a player like Kyle Hamilton who can do so many things, you have to make sure you have like a distinct plan for him as to what he's going to do. And I'm just not sold on Lovie being the guy for that. But like we said before, Kyle Hamilton is just one of those guys that, hey, he might not be amazing in terms of, you trust your defensive coordinator to use him, but it's just the talent. Just get him on your team and worry about the rest later. So
I think, everybody saw that highlight play where he runs from the far hash right to the far sideline to pick off the ball against Florida State. There was a play in that Rose Bowl game against Bama on 20, but he just knifes right in the backfield, takes down Najee Harris. You can see by Harris's reaction, he knew he was gone, but just open field tackling, range, everything you want in that position. As I said, just a couple of knocks in terms of, there's a couple of pre-snap alignments where he got caught underneath the play and things like that. So kind of some coaching, but and there's no perfect prospect, but he was one of those players that thought, can he, impact your defense every down potentially. Look, if you drop him in this defense without any help, probably doesn't make you all that much better, and he's going to have some hard days. But it's a very interesting case study, and I think if he's sitting there and you're third or fourth in the ranking, you think, well, it'd be hard not to pull the trigger. But yeah, definitely a prospect I really enjoyed watching. We tried to pick a couple of top end examples. And a guy you outlined right at the top of the draft, he'll probably go top 5, if not top 3. I don't think I've seen as many kind of complete tackles as that. We have had a couple of good classes last year, a little bit less so. But the 2019 class was, the 2020 class was actually really good. 21 less so. But Evan Neal, Alabama, Jordan, you thought he was one guy well worth putting on people's radar? Yeah,
for sure. I think he's, after those 3 defenders, Thibodeaux, Hutchinson, and Hamilton, I think you got to put Evan Neal, and then I would put Stingley in that next order in terms of like big board ranking. Those would be my top 5 guys for sure. And so I think Evan Neal is the best offensive prospect in this entire class. Like you said, he is a freak of a tackle. And not only has he played tackle, but he's played left guard, he's played right tackle, he's played left tackle. And so we as Texans fans, we are kind of have some nightmares about offensive line being moving around a lot, but he actually has the versatility to do it. And so because we don't know really where Titus is going to play, if Tunsil's still going to be on the team or not, drafting Evan Neal is kind of like a safety type of thing. Like, he can play wherever you want. And so you can get those 3 guys, Tunsil, Neal, and Howard, and just move them around and figure it out and then set them there and you're good. And so I love his ability to be a road grader in the run game. He's just a mauler. He really brings the attitude, the physicality, the toughness into the trenches that this Texans offensive line does not have. I mean, they are the worst run blocking offensive line in the entire NFL. And so getting Neal would be a great start to improve that. I think he's best in like gap and power blocking schemes, but he can do zone too. Like he's still a very good athlete. So he can make all those types of blocks in the run game. And then he's very dependable in pass pro too. Just super strong dude. I mean, he's 6'7", 360, got super long arms. They are like tree trunks of arms. Like they're thick. Like this, you're not going to just bull rush this dude whatsoever. So I really like Evan Neal. I think in terms of weaknesses, there's a few reps where he can struggle with like the really freakish athletes in terms of pass rushing skills and their quickness off the snap. So I would be a little bit wary of that. But overall, like you said, he's a very well-rounded tackle prospect. And this is a really good tackle class as well. Last year, like you said, was good, but this year is again. So Evan Neal will definitely be a guy on my radar.
Yeah, I think so. He looks ready. I mean, obviously, people have seen them doing the it was 360 pounds, and he's doing the box jump at that.
Yeah.
And he's obviously just a well put together athlete. He's not top heavy like sometimes you see tackles. He's definitely pro ready. I think he's got the lowest floor of everybody. I think it's interesting. Brandon Thorne, who obviously if you watch in a bit of O-line, you got to trust his opinion. He's got the guy from North Carolina State, Ikem Ekonwu. Again, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but he's got him as the best run blocker and as well as versatile scheme. So you know, if just say he fell and you had another pick in the top end, he's a guy you can maybe pick, and a guy who's just done unbelievable to. If you look at if you compare last year to this year, Charles Cross at Mississippi State, just like these stocks just risen. Predominantly as a pass blocker, a bit of work to do from the one game that I watched in the run game, but yeah, there's some guys, and then there's a whole kind of bunch of guys that come after those three of the kind of top three picks, but there'll probably someday emerge for that. Darian Kennard from Kentucky as well. He's a kind of guy that's in the mix, and then it's kind of pick your poison at that stage. But it'd be interesting. It would be an interesting prospect if we did go offensive tackle. If that meant we'd maybe move people out, or we'd moved on from other players, or look to maybe take one of those guys. Because I think internally in this draft as well, from Tyler Labron with the guy Green from Texas A&M, because I watched quite a few of his games last year.
Oh, I love
when we took McCollum. That I think and then obviously let him go because we didn't protect any players, but and then ended up starting another centre. But yeah, I watched quite a few of his games last year as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely some value to be had at that position. If you were to pick one right now, just say Thibodeaux off the board, who would you take if you given all those ones we've talked about?
If I'm drafting at 2 or 3,
yeah,
it's definitely Evan Neal. I think he is just the most well-rounded of them and the freakiest athlete of them. And I really love Charles Cross. I really, really love him. I think he could be a better pass protector than Neal potentially, just because he's super quick laterally. But Neal's run blocking, like that's what this Texans line really needs. It's the run blocking. So yeah. I would go with him.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Tyler Labron from Iowa's, I think probably was described to me as the best centre since is it Kelly at was it Alabama when he's at the Colts? Just a guy day one, you just plug in, you don't have to worry about it for 10 years, sort of thing. So, again, if you're in the top end, and then watched a little bit of Zion Johnson as well at Boston College, and I just thought, again, just prototypical. It's the same schools that turn out the same players at the same positions a bit more often than not. But yeah, again, another sort of plug and play guy at the top end of the draft. Very briefly before we go into this next prospect, Jordan, it was Malik Willis versus Matt Corral this weekend. Right. I thought Willis just looked like he was trying to do too much. He just Malik Walker, not Willis. It's Walker, isn't it?
It's Willis.
Willis. Oh, I was right first time.
Yeah, you got it.
I was thinking of myself. Yeah, so many names in my head just now, but yeah. I just thought it was. He just looked like he was doing too much. It reminded me when, do you remember that terrible performance in 2019 at Baltimore when Deshaun was just running around trying to do everything he possibly could, just overplay, and he threw 2 bad picks. It was all pretty much run game. There wasn't much in the passing game, apart from a couple of comebacks and what have you. And I think when you watch that, and then the other side of the field, I think Matt Corral's got a great run game. He's got some great pro-ready linemen that are not quite ready to come out yet. And he kind of sort of sits with that and doesn't have to do a huge amount. I think it was two opposite extremes, but I don't think either of them are probably worthy of maybe a late first. But it's tough to see, I think, between those two guys right now.
Yeah, those are definitely, I think, quarterback 1 and quarterback 2 for sure. That's where they've kind of cemented themselves. And I think, like you said, the talent difference between Ole Miss and between Liberty was just too much to overcome from Malik Willis. And that's been a question mark for him all season.
Yeah.
I think it was like 8 in the first half.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Now in the second half, they had a bit better of a game plan and they actually used him on designed runs. And so that, it slowed down the Ole Miss rush a little bit. So he settled down a little bit, but overall, definitely on the day was not the performance that you really wanted him to see, because the biggest question on him is how does he deal with better competition? And this is the prime game. How does he do? Doesn't look too good. So it's definitely going to be a bit of a blunder on his resume. Now, I would say that one game doesn't make or break a prospect, but it's definitely not the ideal thing that you want to see. So I'm higher on Matt Corral than Malik Willis. I think, like you said, you do have to take into account that Corral has a lot better surroundings, a lot better situation around him. But I think he reminds me, and people aren't going to like this comparison because of how fans feel about this guy right now, but Matt Corral reminds me a lot of college Deshaun Watson. So much of him. They're both very good athletes, but, not elite. Very good runners in terms of using their legs as a weapon, but they're not maybe like Lamar Jackson. Both very good arms. They can make all the throws, but, again, it's not like a cannon like Josh Allen or anything like that, or Patrick Mahomes. I think they both played in an offense that made it a bit easier for them. Both have a lot of screen game, both have a lot of RPO, some pretty good weapons. And then they're both my favorite thing about Corral, my favorite thing about Watson in college is that they're both tough competitors who were clutch. When it comes to third and fourth down, Matt Corral is so clutch. And so I saw that with Watson as well. And so that's why the two of them, I make that a bit of a comparison there. So I like Matt Corral a lot. I would probably still take him early teens. I would take him probably as early as 10. And then anywhere later than that. I like Corral a lot.
Yeah, I think he'll go first. I saw one of his games earlier in the year. I took away the same thing, good run game, just as that he plays within the scheme. Mm-hmm. That may well be down to his mental discipline in it, depending on what situation he finds himself in. He may flourish, he may flounder. But I thought he got up. I think he threw a peck where it was a fumble by the running back, and he went over and he tackled the ball carrier straight away. Yeah. It just shows you what a competitor he is. I think he get in the right spot. He could do a job for a team. I don't know if he will or not, but interesting. Saw a little bit of Desmond Ridder, not quite sure on that. But one guy who I was actually really quite surprised at, and he's been at college for a number of years, was a guy you picked out for Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett. I mean, his interception to touchdown ratio is great. His passing accuracy is the best of his career. He's a little bit older. I think he'll be 24 by the time the next season starts. So there's a little bit there of just that nous in general gameplay and what have you. But what do you think of Kenny Pickett? He certainly seems like the most kind of pro-ready guy, certainly in the system he's in right now.
Yeah, he definitely does. He's a fifth-year senior. Like you said, he's on the older side. But that experience, you really see it on tape. And it kind of gives him that higher floor, like you said. It kind of reminds me a bit of Mac Jones in that sense, where if you give him some good weapons, he can be a starter quality quarterback from day one. And you have that side of him where the mental game is really good. Decision making is good. He can make full field reads. He operates a pro style offense. So that gives you that high floor. But then he also has the athletic traits that gives him a pretty high ceiling. He's got a very good arm. He can make all the throws. He's very, very athletic as well. He gets out of the pocket really easily. Good wheels. He can run as well. So I think in terms of the high floor and the relatively high ceiling, that's a very good bet to take on a quarterback who's being projected late first round, early second round. So I'm a big fan of Kenny Pickett. He was actually the first player that I scouted of this class, and I was just blown away. I was like, why aren't people talking about this dude? What's going on? And then he even took another jump. So I love him. I think the only thing that he should really work to improve on is just anticipating route concepts a bit better. I think sometimes he needs to, and it was the same thing with Deshaun Watson, is that he needs to see it come open before he throws it, rather than anticipating throwing window and throwing the ball before the wide receivers out of their break. So that's the one main thing I would say to work on for him. But yeah, amazing year so far, 68% completion percentage, 29-3 touchdown to interception ratio. And he's driving the ball downfield too, 9.3 yards per attempt. That's a career high as well. So he's willing to throw the ball deep. He'll throw it all levels of the field. I'm a big Pickett fan.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there to like. I think I watched the Tennessee tape. There's a couple of balls that kind of sail on him early. He sometimes trusts his eyes. He said he does have to see it come open. There's not a huge amount of anticipation there. So he's probably got such a high floor just because of the amount, as you said, being in the college system for 5 years at Pittsburgh there. So interesting prospect. He might be one of these guys, you take later in the second round, and and if you get 3 or 4 years at these guys and they can play, and it might not necessarily be a starter every week, but having these guys and you're building at the most important position is definitely something to consider. But it's such a mixed bag with the quarterback year. There's no 3 or 4 guys lining up. Not there necessarily has been the last few years, but certainly it's deja vu a bit in terms of wanting a signal caller right at the top. I don't think there's going to be any this year.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think even though this is a weaker quarterback class, I think we can learn a good lesson from last year's quarterback class that everyone praised as an amazing one, right? Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. It's rare, and Mac Jones. It's rare to have that many guys at the top, but we're seeing that like these guys need time to develop. Like they're not all pro ready. They're not all ready to just come in day one and shoot the lights off, right? So yeah. I think we can learn that and apply that to this class as well. Like have patience with Matt Corral, have patience with Malik Willis. Those are the 2 guys that I think have the highest ceiling. And so I think they would also be guys that would benefit a lot from sitting behind a veteran for half a season or a season, however long it may take, and just don't rush them into things. And especially in the Texans scenario where their offense, like no one's going to play well behind that. No one really will. Like Tyrod can do a little bit better. He had a horrible game, probably worst game of his career versus Miami, but he'll do a little bit better than Davis Mills will. But on a whole, it's not a good situation to throw a rookie quarterback into. So
no,
whoever the Texans want to take, if they even take a quarterback this year, maybe they don't. I would say definitely to let them sit for as long as they can. Just be patient.
Yeah, I think so. And it's going to be 2 to 3 drafts before we start building a roster again that's respectable. So I think it's kind of plus some good free agent signings in there. So bringing a guy in that and forcing the issue is not going to do anybody any favors. I've got 2 offensive prospects I want to run through really quickly. There's a common theme here, and it's speed. You can't teach it. And 2 guys that I think this year, out of any year, and this was kind of why I was surprised we didn't move on from Brandon Cooks, because it's the easiest position to draft these days. At wide receiver, I think there's going to be a huge kind of fall down of definitely kind of there's going to be, you've probably got 12, 15 guys in any year that can come in and contribute day one. You've seen that every sort of class in the last while. So Jamison Williams, so actually was a strange prospect because he's an Ohio State transfer. He was in college, the end of high school. He had the option to go at either Alabama or Ohio State, and he chose Ohio State there. But he's just a burner. He probably will sit. I don't know if he'll be up the John Ross kind of stakes there in the 40 time at the combine, but he's got a chance. And I think whether it's on screens, whether it's on punt returns, whether it's on just got great hands. I think the questions about these speed guys, and a replacement for the sort of Will Fuller type, who every offense need can stretch the field every week. He's making a highlight reel play, just gets them. But the safeties are giving themselves 5, 10, 15 yards sometimes, spacing behind, and he's beating them to the ball. And I think he's such a weapon to have. And I think just because of the depth of that, the fact that the position is devalued versus those couple of top, you could get him in the second, maybe even early third round, because we'll be picking high, so you always get that little bit extra value at the start of the next round. So I think Jamison Williams for me is just a guy that's going to be speed, and he's going to open up the field and stretch an offense. And look, he may blow up the combine and go late first, early second. but with the depth of that position, potentially not. Obviously, you've got the big guys, Drake London at USC, you've got the two kids for Ohio State. You've got Justin Ross at Clemson. So there's so many guys that are the prototypical kind of X receiver, and this guy plays the Z, or he can play the slot. So he's a guy that I like a lot.
Yeah, me too. I'm so glad you brought up that name because I absolutely love him too. I felt like I was higher on him than I guess the consensus, but I'm with you on that for sure. I think he's going to end up being my wide receiver either 3 or 4. Like he's going to be in my top 5 for sure. But because you just can't teach that speed, like you said. And you did a great job breaking down his game. I think what I'll add is you brought up Will Fuller, and that's my player comp for him. It's Will Fuller, but with better hands and better hamstrings. Because no one can catch this guy. Yeah, no one can catch this guy in the open field. You can move him around in the slot or at Z, like you said. And his speed, his ability, even as a route runner. Like I think he is actually a pretty underrated route runner. He uses head fakes pretty well. He knows how to attack defenders' leverage. He absolutely kills off coverage. The only thing I'll say is he should probably get a little bit stronger and to beat press. But that's about it. Like with how good he is versus off coverage and how dangerous he is deep. Like he'll have some time to develop that other parts of his game. So I absolutely love him. I think he's a first round talent all day, but yeah, definitely might slip to the early second. I don't think he'll get out of the top 50 picks, to be honest. He's really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, you just never know with that position. There's so many like value picks to find at wide receiver just because of the mass that are coming out. He's listed at 188, and I don't think he is that looking at his frame. So yeah, he will definitely need to bulk up, try and get off press man at the line of scrimmage. But yeah, definitely a guy I think he may well, depending on his combine time, might get overdrafted. We'll see on that. But another guy that I really liked as well was Kenneth Walker at Michigan State. He's a Wake Forest transfer, but again, just speed. But he's well put together. He's only 5'10", but he's 210 pounds. He's listed it there, but he's one of these guys that doesn't actually look like he's running all that fast on the tape, but nobody catches him. He's probably scheme versatile. He's got really good vision at the line of scrimmage. He scored 5 touchdowns against Michigan the other week there, so he scored 15 on the season already. He's racked up over 1,300 yards. He's got probably scheme versatility that will make him probably go reasonably early, and I think he's up there in the conversation for the top 3 at the position. Whether teams start taking running backs again this year, you just never know. There's usually a run on them. But there's definitely a number of guys there. Isaiah Spiller at Texas A&M, really exciting prospect. But what I thought gave the Walker the edge was just the fact that he can just put his foot in the ground and go. He's got a great habit of letting the play develop and then one cut inside or outside and taking it into space, and people struggle to catch him at that point. So kind of really good. And I think the knock on him is can he be a 3-down back? But I think in college when it's he's had 10 receptions this year, so he's kind of addressed that in some sense. When you think everything goes to wide receivers, even the tight ends in most of the college, apart from the Big Ten schools or what have you, are wide receivers in essence anyway. So he's definitely attacked that perception in a way, but I think there's definitely a lot there to like: speed, power, scheme versatility. I think he's a guy that can give your offense some excitement, something that we desperately need at the running back position for so long now.
Yeah, definitely. You basically everything you said is basically what I have from my notes on him, pros and cons, everything. So I won't regurgitate basically everything you said. I think the only thing I'll add, talking about the 3-down back, I'm not worried about him in terms of like the receiving game, the pass game. I think he's definitely got the athleticism for that, the jump cuts, like you said, to make guys miss in terms of those routes in space. But I think it's the pass protection that might hurt him. So he might not be as dependable in that sense, because I don't know, from what I saw, it just seemed like he was a little bit slow to process like blitzes and stuff like that, which guy to pick up. And so I think that can come with experience and it can be improved over time for sure. But that's why for me, he's running back 3 for me behind Spiller, like you said, and behind Kyren Williams, because both those guys are more complete. But as a pure runner, yeah, this guy's an absolute freak. He is a big play waiting to happen for sure. He's going to have multiple 50, 60, 70-yard touchdowns when his career's done. So he's going to be an electric guy. I think he's probably going to be a guy who gets overdrafted. I don't see him getting out of the second round for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think Kyren Williams is like the guy who's probably leans a bit more towards that kind of scat back, but has probably got the 3-down potential. Like he's coming from the other angle. And then Breece Hall at Iowa State as well. I think he's a guy that's going to be up there as in the conversation. And again, it's kind of pick your poison. sort of kind of stuff there. But yeah, look, if we can add some speed, add some excitement in this grueling offense at times to watch whoever's calling the plays next year. But I think they could definitely benefit. Staying with the big schools, Jordan, you were looking at Alabama's inside linebacker Henry Toto. Is that right?
I think it's To'o. I don't really know, to be honest.
There's
I haven't
a lot
heard
of difficult ones this year, I think.
It is always. But yeah, I'm a big fan of him. So another third transfer we're talking about in a row. He transferred from Tennessee, came to Alabama, and it's funny because Alabama, like when you think about Alabama's defense right now, you think about Christian Harris in terms of linebackers. That's where people, they always think he's like a first round linebacker. And if you watch the two play together, you'll see such a big difference in their talent level. And I think the main thing that sticks out to me is that Henry To'o has really quick instincts. He reads plays really, really quickly. And so he's always reacting quickly and going to the ball even before the play develops, whereas Harris is a bit slower in that regard. And so seeing the contrast between those two, it really elevated my opinion of I'm just going to call him Henry. I'm just going to call him Henry because that's easier. Yeah. But I think he is a day one ready run defender. He's a little bit undersized for the position. I think he's like 6'2", 210 or 220, something like that. But he's a small linebacker, especially for a Mike linebacker. But I think he's perfect for the Lovie Smith scheme because we have a bunch of undersized linebackers who are just freak athletes and good in coverage. And so that's what Henry is. Really great instincts in the run game and really good flashes of moments in pass coverage as well. He's not perfect there. He definitely needs some refinement, but because he's so athletic, he's got really fluid hips, good change of direction ability, and he's got enough instincts there where he kind of knows what's going on in terms of route combinations and stuff like that. So I think he can be the Texans like Mike linebacker of the future in Lovie Smith's scheme or in any other scheme really. So he's one of those guys who just, I'm going to pound the table for him, just draft him wherever you need to. I absolutely love him.
Yeah, I think he's one of these guys that inside linebackers, a position you can potentially get later on.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to pull a fastball on you here and change my sleeper because when I was trying to look for your guy on the same team, Indiana, it's Mika McFadden.
I love him too.
He's the inside linebacker. And I remember when Cutley described Garrett Wallow as a football playing Jesse, but like he's not really that. If I'm interpreting that phrase right, but this guy is. I think he can cover the pass. He's a potential maybe year 2 starting Mike linebacker. You probably get him out the top 100. Just at that position just being perhaps slightly devalued. I think in terms of that position, but he makes tackles for loss in the backfield. He understands the game. His football IQ is sky high. You can see when he makes plays that he's read it. He's got downhill and he's reacting, and he can cover in zone as well. And he gets good depth on his drops and really kind of covers up the passing lanes really well. So yeah, he was a guy again I just found a couple of days ago. Just jotted down his name, started watching some of his tapes. So there's definitely gold to be found. As you get out the top 100, and I think he might be a guy that finds his way on a team. For
sure, yeah. I'm really glad you brought up that name because I think you nailed him as an evaluation. I think the other thing is that he's a really good blitzer. They love to blitz him up the middle. Indiana does, and so I think he's a bit undersized, but he makes up for it with how competitive he is, how he plays with good technique, and so I think Texans defense doesn't do that too much, but I think it's a way that they should. It's something that they should implement to get more pressure, blitzing those linebackers. And so McFadden adds more value in that sense. So yeah, I love him as well. I think he's probably going to be drafted 3rd, 4th round. And at that value, that's great.
Yeah. I don't know how they continue to get away with it, but I watched 3 games and they just do that sort of kind of cross dog or whatever you call it, blitz, where the 2 linebackers come inside and cross over and try and make the offensive lineman make a decision. But he seemed to get a lot of joy out of that. I mean, that'll get swallowed up a little bit more at the next level. So he might have to work on some of his hand fighting and a bit more of his leverage at the line. But yeah, he was a guy that I liked. You also had a kind of sleeper, kind of later guy on the same team. He wasn't playing in the first game I watched. That was how I started getting from the last weekend there. I think it was against Michigan. But yeah, you had a slot corner, right? Yes.
So let me pull up his stats. Indiana, Tijuan Mullen. He was one of the first guys I watched this year. Slot corner, 5'10", 180. So he definitely doesn't have that size that you want for the outside. But as a freshman, he had 13 pass breakups. Then as a sophomore, he had just 4 pass breakups, but 3 interceptions, 3.5 sacks. And so he's a guy who kind of reminds me of Kenny Moore because he's a playmaker. He's a guy who can do it in coverage. He can defend the run, and he can also blitz. They send him on a lot of nickel blitzes. And I've got nightmares from Kenny Moore sacking Deshaun Watson too many times on those nickel blitzes. So I thought that would be a good element to add to the Texans defense. They seem to not want to play Desmond King at nickel corner. I think Tavier Thomas has actually been pretty solid there. But if they want to get younger, go with Tijuan Mullen out of Indiana. He can do a little bit of everything for you. I just think he's a really feisty guy. Really tough competitor as a defensive back, likes to get his hands onto receivers, likes to push them off their routes. And he's got good ball skills, good timing and execution as a blitzer, like I mentioned before. So yeah, he'd be my sleeper guy. I'm not seeing many people talk about him. And I think this year he's dealt with some injuries. So that's why he probably wasn't in the game that you watched. But I think he'll be a guy who you can probably get on day 3. So we're talking about sleeper, like this guy's probably around 4, 5, 6 is where you can probably get him. And I think eventually he could be a starting nickel corner who just makes plays for you. Always is going to pop up in the box score. So I like him a lot.
Yeah, my original sleeper, just to round us off, was Caleb Evans. He was a Tulsa transfer, and he's got all the measurables. If you watch his Tulsa tape, great, understands leverage, understands how to jam people at the line. He gets good depth. He can play the ball. Transferring to SEC, he had lots of offers. He could have gone to Texas. I think he got an offer from Notre Dame as well. And he's got all the measurables there, but I just don't think he's quite transferred that skill set to the SEC this year. Not played all that well for Mizzou. I watched a couple of games. They've kind of been blown out in a couple, so it's kind of hard as a corner when you're just when the game's done. But he's a guy potentially again you could get later on. He was a name that was flagged to me. Watched a couple of his games. You can see it all there at Tulsa, perhaps less so at Mizzou. But yeah, there's definitely these kind of bigger schools. There's guys that are in there that are that have got. And I think with the transfer portal now, Jordan, there's so many guys moving around. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up with who's actually eligible, and then it's hard to keep up where they've moved to. And then I think a lot of players are putting a lot of change around them. It might not always necessarily help them, but again, we've talked about mostly transfers here, so maybe it is a good thing they're opening it up.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always, football is such a situational sport. Like players will do horribly in situation X and then go to situation Y and just do so much better because of coaching, because of stuff that's going off the field. And so I think transfer portal is definitely a great opportunity to give these kids another chance at proving themselves to the league and fulfilling that dream in the NFL. So yeah, I think probably about half of the prospects we talked to today were transfer guys. So it goes to show the talent that there is in college ball. So yeah, it's been great to watch it this year, man.
Yeah, no, I think I've watched more this year definitely than I have in the last 3 or 4 years combined, partly because it didn't matter. But this year, hopefully, we're going to pick up some. And I think that this kind of gave me a bit of energy again to hopefully hope for better days, because there's you see how much guys, when you trade multiple first round picks, how much stuff you miss out on, how many opportunities to make your team better in multiple ways. And I think we'll hopefully see this team can take a step forward. Whoever's kind of stewarding it from the sidelines, maybe a different entity altogether by the time we get there. But any last words, John, before we head out here? It's a good hour on prospects, a fair distance out from the draft. Yeah, no, draft time, best time of the year. That's all I got to say. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate you as always. And till next time. Yeah, let's loop back in again. Let's review some more as we get towards the end of the year. And that so it was a long kind of period, isn't it? Sort of March and April. So let's see where we are. But hopefully we'll have a bona fide ball player on our team and to take the talent level forward, because it can't get much worse right now as we sit here at the bye week. But Jordan, thank you very much for your time, mate. These Texans thoughts, you can check them out if you've not checked anything out on the website podcasttexans.com. If you're watching, give us a like, subscribe, do all that kind of good stuff, get them algorithms churning, and hopefully some of these prospects and some of the time here well out will pay dividends at the water cooler or wherever. But thanks again for listening, and we'll come back to you after what hopefully isn't another grueling defeat in Tennessee, but we'll catch you again next week.